Okay, so we need to figure out, or William needed to figure out what was his, what belonged to him now that he's in this new country. And so he has a good idea to go about and send people out. First, he needs to get rid of the Saxon lords and start putting in his own men and putting in French speakers, which he does. And then he decides to create something, and it ends up getting the name Doomsday Book, because basically after this was compiled, everyone felt like because of all of the political, cultural, linguistics upheaval that it was the end of the world. So it got the name the Doomsday Book. And so you're going to watch a short 2-minute clip that is in British English.
Hello, can you open the door, please? Good morning, sir. My name's Matilda, and I'm calling today on behalf of William the Conqueror concerning the new Doomsday Book.
Sorry, I don't buy things at the door.
No selling, sir, just a straightforward survey. Would you be willing to answer a few questions?
I don't really like surveys.
I should point out this morning, sir, that as a conquered Saxon you are obliged to answer the survey, or a big Norman knight will come round and chop your head off.
All right then.
Lovely. First of all, can I take your name?
They call me Athelstan Redbeard.
Mr. Redbeard. And would you describe yourself as Saxon, Celtic, Pictish or other?
Saxon.
And can I ask, were you aware that you had been conquered?
Beg your pardon?
Were you previously aware that your army had been vanquished by William the Conqueror and that you're now ruled by the Normans of Normandy, France?
No.
I'm afraid from now on it'll be no. All right?
Yes.
From now on it'll be oui. Is that okay?
We.
Bon. So, how many pigs have you got?
6.
Six. And how many goats do you have?
11.
11. And how many chickens do you have?
15. 14.
14 poulets. Combien de poulets avez-vous?
14 poulets, madame.
Lovely. And can I ask, do you own your own home?
No, I'm a serf.
I'll put commoner's mark. And finally, do you swear allegiance to your new king, William of Normandy? We'll give you a few seconds to make your mind up.
Yes, I do.
Excellent. I'll put that down as a oui.
Do you want to buy any dusters?
No.
So, again, comical, but it is kind of what went on. They went around, they figured out exactly what everyone had, what they owned. And then the king was able to say, well, if you have 14 chickens, then you need to give one to me. If you have 10 pigs, you need to give one to me. So through this, we end up getting the first census. He now knows exactly how many people. We now know how much they own and how much wealth, so we can figure out how much that they come to him. And this was the creation of income tax. So we have, two things that he has now created that we still do. But the other thing is that he also brought the legal system from France. This idea that things should be orderly. And here's another copy of the Doomsday Book. So it still exists. We still have copies. Sometimes it's just a list of things and people, especially if it was country. But, we also know that at this point in England, there were this many towns with over 2,000 people who were gathered in them. So think about that from 1,000 years ago. He was able to pinpoint pretty accurately exactly who has what, who was where, and what all was his. He wasn't happy with some of the laws. Different places did different things. Each city had its own kind of code. And so he decided that he liked the way things were working in France. It was very orderly, so he brings that with him. And he starts to implement some very specific things in order to bring about a cohesiveness to his conquered people. He says only one God will be worshipped. It will be the same God between the English and the Normans, so that there's peace. All freemen will swear an oath to be loyal to the king. Pretty straightforward. Those men who came to England with William at Hastings will be guaranteed their safety. The reason being is he got a coalition together. It wasn't just the French he brought with him. He had some different Celtic people, some Dutch people, and so anyone who came with him automatically would be safe and be given tracts of land, etc. And here's some of the things that were specifically put into place to protect them. All Frenchmen who shared in the customs of the English when Edward was king would pay something called Scot and Lot. In other words, people who had come from France and were already doing things in the English fashion, he wanted to punish them. If you were French, you should have been acting like a French person. No live cattle could be sold outside cities. This sounds a little bit odd, but think about it. If two farmers in the countryside decide to exchange things or exchange cattle or sell their cattle, etc., the king doesn't know about it. So he creates cattle markets. And so all of the cattle must be brought into the cities. It's sold. We have witnesses. So basically he can skim a little profit off of it with taxes. If a Frenchman accuses an Englishman of murder, theft, or perjury, specific laws, the Englishman shall be allowed to defend himself either by ordeal through combat or by hot iron. If he's too ill, he could choose someone else. Notice that if it's the opposite, an Englishman accuses a Frenchman and is unwilling to prove his case, then he only gets combat or hot iron. But if he can't prove it, then the Frenchman is acquitted as long as he swears an oath of innocence. So a little bit of favoritism still shown to the French. All the laws regarding land ownership shall be kept alongside those of Edward. In other words, things that people were already used to. He didn't want to upset it too much. So he left a lot of things in place. The people who were in charge, he executed all of them and put his people in. But basically, if you were a landowner or if you were like the serf in the video, basically a slave who worked for a lord, your lord is a new person now, but wherever you live is still yours. The things that you've been doing are still yours. So he's going to say, we're not going to change hands too much, but now I'm putting some new laws in. You need to pay attention to these new laws. And he started instituting this idea of a court of law, that if there were some problems, you needed to come in, swear a oath of loyalty, you would swear an oath to tell the truth, and then you would come before a judge to have things sorted out. You would no longer just go to your town council or whomever. You would go to someone who's been appointed by William. No man is allowed to sell another man, so he gets rid of slavery throughout the kingdom. Because again, he needs to start building up a cohesiveness, and he doesn't want the French and the English not trusting each other, so he doesn't want the English kidnapping the French and selling them, or the French kidnapping the English and selling them. So outlaw slavery. And notice he says and he outlaws the death penalty. No one will be executed. But if they are found guilty, then they're blinded and castrated. So notice what this implicates automatically. Women don't commit crimes. And that is because really at this point women didn't have much of an identity. Once they were married, it was their husband. So if a woman committed a crime, her husband would be tried for it. And if found to be guilty, he would be blinded and castrated. And his enforcement. This was the biggest problem, because if someone were to commit a crime in one city and then travel to another city, there may be a different punishment or a different way of going about looking at it. And he said William said, this is crazy. We need to make sure that there's one way of looking at things. So he required that every judge that he appointed to these courts of law come to London once a year. They would meet in council. They would compare all of their cases from the past year, and then they would make sure to reconcile them. If one judge found one specific fact pattern one way and another judge found a very similar fact pattern a different way, they would talk it out to figure out what was the best outcome, and then they would rewrite the law to make sure that it fit this. And so this is the idea that they would come together and create a common law, so that everyone throughout the kingdom, if you went from city to city, you would always know exactly what was expected of you and what the punishments were. This common law means that judges rely on previous cases in order to figure out the answer to any future cases. So that if I've had a case where a guy stabs someone else in the middle of the night, and then I go through and I reason through and I give you my reasons of why I said this guy's guilty, Then another case comes up very similar, then I already know what to do as a judge. Or if someone else in another county has done it, I already know because we've met through the year, I have a list of their cases, and I know what to do. This spread to the U.S. with the colonization of the U.S., and it's still our system of law in the U.S. today, the common law system. And this is often referred to the stare decisis system. In other words, we look to previous cases in order to decide later cases, and stare decisis literally means let the decision stand. And so this is why we talk about things like Roe v. Wade. We're still referring back to that. It's because that's good law. It's not just the legislature that has the ability to make law. We also have the court system, in certain specific instances, can create law. And then they apply that constantly. Often what will happen is you get a case, such as Roe, that's very powerful, and then the legislatures will create laws matching up to what the courts said, so that we have one cohesive system in this country. And that is it for Chapter 1.